Hello, welcome back to Endurance Minded. We're going to get into it today and we're going to talk about recovery. Talked at length about this topic on this show over the last 7 years. There is any number of books, resources, technology, different modalities that are talking about recovery, how to recovery, or how to recover, why recovery is so important. I think it's top of mind for so many people, no matter where you're at, whether you're coming from an athletic identity, whether you're thinking about it from a productivity perspective, recovery is key. But we're going to think about it a little differently today. We're not going to talk about recovery through the traditional lens. We're not going to think about it as just a box that we need to check. We're not going to think about it as a wearable that we wear on our wrist or our finger and track our sleep. We're going to look at it in a more nuanced light. We're going to look at it in through the lens of a way that allows us to compartmentalize and think about recovery integrated fully into our lives. And we're going to talk about it primarily as a skill that you can train. We're going to talk about how you can not only train it, but you can measure it, you can leverage it, and then we're going to boil that down into what I've defined as the 4 dimensions of recovery. We have physical, mental, emotional, and then strategic recovery, which I'm really excited to unpack. And then we're going to walk away with a 7-day practice that's going to really help you take note of what recovery looks like in your life and that strategic implementation of it so that you can show up as the best version of yourself, be the person you want to be as productive as you would like to be, and feel good, right? Recovery ultimately is the modality that puts gas back in our tank. If we want to go out in the world, we want to exert ourselves physically, emotionally, mentally. We want to build things. We want to push ourselves and our boundaries in all areas of our lives. Recovery is the thing that allows us to do that. It cannot be an afterthought. It has to be something that we prioritize every single day. So, I want to set the stage by recognizing that most people think about recovery as resting, right? So, what do I do when I recover? I'm going to rest. I'm going to sleep. Maybe take a nap. Maybe take some downtime. You take time away from work. You take time away from screens. You are resting. You are interrupting your normal pace and the normal way that you engage, and you're resting. And while all of those things are fine and healthy and part of recovery, I also want you to think about recovery as training. I want you to think about it because if you don't train your recovery, you'll never reach your true ceiling or your full potential. In the same way that if you don't train your body, if you don't train your mind, if you don't consistently put yourself in situations and scenarios that push you, you'll also fall short, right? So it's the same thing with recovery. Is if we don't train recovery, then we're never going to know where that ceiling is because we're going to not have the capacity to actually push in the other areas of life that we're talking about. So we're going to redefine what recovery actually is in this episode. We're going to break it into 4 dimensions, like I mentioned, and we're going to talk about very specific tools so you can walk away from this episode with a tactical understanding of what recovery can and should look like even, and ways that you can put that into play right now. So if you're listening to this episode, pull out your phone, your notes app, a piece of paper, whatever it is, voice memos. You're going to want to be able to engage with this one. I'm going to give you some really key tactical pieces that you can walk away with. So let's talk about first why our current view of recovery isn't working for us. Why is recovery as we typically think about it? Again, we think about recovery or someone mentions recovery and we go to rest. Let's talk about why that's outdated or no longer serving us. First and foremost, it's just a binary way of thinking about things, right? We have work versus rest, and that recovery is just time off. Well, we know that as we move through life and our days get busy and things are hectic and dynamic, that often this binary way of thinking about things doesn't work, right? We have to integrate different things into our life, right? Maybe work-life balance, certainly as as things evolve and as we think about how we show up in our lives consistently. I think that the idea of kind of these hard stops, these black and white binary lanes that we have traditionally thought that we should stay in, I think we're starting to see those erode. People are looking for more blended approach, right? How do I not only work, but how do I exercise? How do I engage with my family, my friends, people I care about? How all these things kind of fit together in a way that feels more cohesive, that feels like more of a rhythm and a flow versus a balance. And so I think this binary mindset just kind of sets us up for failure so often when it comes to how we actually need to move through our lives. These things, I think, are different these days. I think a lot of people are searching for a different understanding, a different definition of what it looks like to actually do these things well. Next is, the reality of things is that recovery is just layered, right? It's active, it's inactive, it's integrated. It is a wholly separate thing. It is different things at different times, and that is really important, right? That we expand the definition of recovery, and the reason that this is important is because so many of us recover reactively. What I mean by that is we only think about recovery, or we only think about really prioritizing it when we're exhausted, when we've pushed too far, when we're on the other side of our ability to show up, when our bodies are breaking down, when we're injured, when we don't have any more, good critical thinking skills left, when we're tired. Then we're like, okay, great, now it's time to recover. There is a world where it serves us best to think about this proactively. That's really what we're going to talk about today, is how do we integrate this? How do we change this binary mindset from I'm working to I've worked as much as I can, whether that's in training or life or our career. And now that I've done as much work as I can, now I'm going to recover, right? So when I reach my limit, I'm going to flip this proverbial switch and I'm going to move to recovery. What we need to do, and what I'm advocating in this episode, is that we shift that to a more proactive approach to recovery, a more integrated approach, so that we can consistently push ourselves and not bump up against that threshold so much so that we have to totally shut it down, right? We can continue to push and continue to drive because we're layering in recovery on a consistent basis. Again, I want to break down the 4 dimensions of what that recovery actually is. But when we do that, we can show up more consistently day after day versus this kind of boom and bust approach, which I think is, again, this binary approach to recovery is what that sets us up for. We're going to push, 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 and then we're going to have to recover, right? And when we do that, it's typically a big swing and overcorrection oftentimes towards recovery versus just consistent application day after day, making sure that we can continue to grow. So we know that if you only recover when you are burned out, you're not recovering. I would call that survival. So if you're only recovering when you're so far past your limit, when you're exhausted, burnt out, totally, brain dead, whatever you want to call that, that's just survival, right? That is a mechanism. It's a forced response to a situation or position that we've put ourselves in versus, again, taking on a more layered approach to recovery. So let's talk about the 4 dimensions of recovery. Like I promised, I'm going to break this down into 4 key areas. We're going to talk about physical recovery. We're going to talk about mental recovery, emotional recovery, and then strategic recovery. And with this, you're going to see kind of the entire picture really take shape. So what's physical recovery? Physical recovery is its sleep quality. So we know this is the one that gets the most attention, certainly in the last couple of years with the advent and increased robustness of wearables. We have a tremendous amount of insight into our sleep. We're seeing that most people are chronically under-rested. We're seeing that sleep quality is typically severely diminished based on any number of factors. We're seeing that sleep consistency is something that suffers greatly. So we know that sleep is a really big part of, or has to be a really critical part of, your physical recovery. Most specifically, again, so many of us, most of us have access to this information now. It's sleep quality. So you can get 8 hours of sleep, but if you have 8 hours of interrupted sleep, if your sleep quality, so REM and deep sleep, are poor, if you are dehydrated, if you're drinking, caffeinated beverages, if you're eating later, if your metabolism is in overdrive, if you're working out late, there's so many factors that contribute to a diminished sleep quality. And that we know is really needs to be a key focus. We also want to see sleep consistency in terms of when you are going to bed and when you're waking. We also know, again, with the access to data that we now have, that sleep consistency is something that's extremely important, and actually is probably one of the best kind of contributing factors to how rested and recovered we actually are. Going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, getting enough sleep, making sure that sleep is quality, but also that the consistency piece is there. We're not going to bed at 8 o'clock one night because we're crashed and burned, going to sleep at midnight the night before, waking up at 4 in the morning, waking up at 8 in the morning because we can't pry ourselves out of bed because we're exhausted. Again, you can see the difference between this boom and bust approach, this binary approach to work and rest, like I talked about earlier, versus a more integrated approach where we're working on consistent application of recovery day in and day out. Another aspect of physical recovery is nutrition. So nutrition that supports repair. And this can be a whole nother episode in and of itself. Again, we have lots of access to this information now. Wearables are telling us, what our caloric burn is, what our resting heart rate is. It gives us a lot of insight into how our nutrition is supporting the recovery and the repair that we need. But ultimately, we know that we need to have macro and micronutrients. We need to make sure that we're getting enough of all of those things. We're seeing a big focus on protein intake in the last couple of years. That is ultimately a good direction. We're seeing that so many people recognized, again, with access to data, that they were protein deficient, which came with any number of issues, certainly energy availability, musculature repair, and so on. And then we have to have hydration, right? So when we talk about nutrition, we have to talk about hydration. As the saying goes, 95% of our problems can be fixed with drinking some more water and going to bed on time, right? So sleep and hydration are really critical pieces of physical recovery. We know that so many people are chronically dehydrated. Not only do we need water, but we need minerals, we need electrolytes. We need to make sure that we are replenishing our body. If you're working out, we need to make sure that we take that into account and add in even more intake to ensure that we are fully hydrated, hydrated at a cellular level. So nutrition is another key component of physical recovery. Then we have movement, right? And this might be the one I think that throws people off, or that maybe we don't think about, but it's movement that restores instead of depletes. Again, I think this is the movement component is where things can get very binary. If I'm going to move, it's going to be a quote unquote workout. I'm going to make it hard. I'm going to feel pressure to make it intense. I'm going to feel pressure to burn a lot of calories, whatever that is. But movement can be and should be restorative at the right time. We have things like yoga and taking a walk and doing mobility work and stretching and, breath work and just, sitting and moving your body in different ways, maybe in different planes than we're used to. But part of physical recovery is restorative movement and making sure that that is taken into consideration. This can be a light lift, right? Go for a walk while you're on the phone. Integrate movement in a way that makes sense. Not everything needs to be or should be a quote unquote workout. We want to have movement that is actually restorative. One of my favorite sayings, I don't know where I heard this, but I heard it a long time ago, and it's motion is the lotion. What that means is that motion, it lubricates things. It keeps you active. It keeps you healthy. It keeps your joints and musculature in repair. It calls attention to the things that are not moving well, the things that are hurting, the things that need attention. I mean, there's so much value in movement over and above just being physically fit or adding to your fitness. And again, as we know, a body in motion wants to stay in motion. So continuing to move in ways that are outside of just exercise, quote unquote, becomes very, very important as it relates to longevity. So one of the ways you can think about your or track your physical recovery is to think about your sleep debt. So we're going to focus on sleep, and for 1 week, just look at how much sleep are you not getting, right? So again, I want you to track those three areas. I want you to track consistency. When are you going to bed and when are you waking up? I want you to track your quality of sleep, and then I want you to track your quantity of sleep. So how consistently is your bedtime routine and your wake up routine? Again, do you go to sleep at 10 and wake up at 6 every day, or is it all over the map? How long are you sleeping for? So you're getting that 7 to 9 hours that's recommended, and what's the quality of sleep within that? When you look at that for a week, you can start to get some really good data. Again, there's easy ways to collect this. Most folks have wearables these days that are collecting some type of sleep data. Look at that and then start to make some adjustments based on the information that you're getting to improve your physical recovery. The next piece of our framework here is the mental recovery, right? So we have physical, now we have mental. What is mental recovery? So much of our mental load comes from the cognitive load placed on us by having to make lots of decisions. So decision fatigue drains performance. And I want to give you a framework within a framework. If you'll bear with me, I want to give you a three-part decision-making framework that I found really useful because, again, decision fatigue stacks up and it reduces cognitive load. It reduces our ability to function at a high level mentally. So if you are like literally everyone else and you have a million things on your plate and the decisions that you need to make are stacking up, decisions with work, decisions with your home life, with your family, who's doing pickup, who's taking the dog to the vet, what are you making for dinner, when are you going to work out, the emails, like it stacks so quickly. Here's what I want you to think about. First, is the decision, do you have 70% of the information? So one of the reasons that we get trapped in or pulled into or stuck in decision fatigue is that we are waiting for more information on a particular decision because we think that more information is going to help us make that decision more clearly. The fact of the matter is that's not the case. More information, scientifically, studies show that more information does not help us make a better decision. So if you have 70% of the information, I want you to go ahead and make the decision, right? So if you have the bulk of the information, make the decision. Second piece, is it reversible? So is the thing that you are waiting to make a decision on, if you make the decision, can you reverse it? If so, make it right now, right? Those are things, if it's not irreversible, then go ahead and make the decision. You can always redo it. Then I want you to think about, is not making a decision causing more harm than if you were to make the wrong decision, right? Because we have to remember that not making a decision is a decision in and of itself. So the third piece of this framework is that I want you to ask yourself, is not making this decision, is waiting, is stalling, actually doing more harm than if I just made the wrong decision but was able to move on? And of course, if the answer is yes, I want you to make a decision. What that's going to do is it's going to start to free up a tremendous amount of space. There are a lot of things that we're sitting on that we could just move on. Right? Again, I'm going to repeat those really quickly. Is it reversible? The answer is yes. Make a decision. Do I have 70% of the information? If so, make a decision. Is it doing more harm for me to sit on this thing than to make a wrong decision? If yes, make a decision. What's going to be left are the things that are actually holding weight. And by all means, there are things that we need to sit on. There's things that we need to think about. There's things that we need to mull over. There are things that we need more information on, but it's not everything. So if you are someone who is struggling with mental recovery, if you're feeling mentally burned out, mentally drained, mentally bogged down, part of that inevitably is probably decision fatigue. And so I want you to run the decisions that you have to make through those three things that I just told you and watch how some of that space in your mind gets cleared up. Again, we're going to increase the cognitive ability, right? And we're going to free up some brain space. We're going to free up some bandwidth to actually go make some good decisions and apply that energy elsewhere in the world. Next, mental recovery wise, I want to give you some tools, a couple things to think about. One, batch your time. Pull together the things that are alike and try to do them at similar times. If you have, great example of this is blocks for emails, blocks for phone calls, blocks for family time, blocks for planning, blocks for meal prep, things that require similar mental bandwidth, similar thought processes. Try to pull those things together so that you're not constantly bouncing from one thing to the next, and you can try to aggregate certain aspects so that you can put your brain to that thing, you can solve those problems, and you can move on. Next, things like no meeting days. So I'm going to switch to work here. Have days where you can just get work done, right? Or block out time where you're just doing meetings. Block out time where you can have space to do deep work. You can have space to think and plan and strategize. And so make sure to try and be in control of your calendar as much as you can. If you don't have control over your work days, do that in the morning, right? Can you wake up 30 minutes early to have some space and time to think or read or plan or map out your day, right? Take back control of the time that you have, whatever that autonomy looks like for you in actual application. There are times where you can take control of that space and time. And then setting digital boundaries is another way to reduce the mental load, right? Put your phone away is ultimately what this means. We know that we spend as a population far too much time on our phones. That wears us down. We get into comparison traps. The list goes on. We know that generally speaking is not the healthiest way for us to spend our time. Also, sitting in front of a TV and vegging out while it can feel good, also not a great way to spend our time all the time. So set digital boundaries for yourself. When do you put your phone away? A lot of times in the evening, this parlays into that sleep consistency piece. What is your wind down routine? When do you go to bed? Can you read a book? Can you get away from screen time? Can you get away from the blue light? All this is going to start to help with the recovery process. So the way to move on this is I want you to pick one time period, right? It can be a day, it can be a time block, it can be 10 minutes. And I want you to block it out for deep work. I want you to block out a specific time period and eliminate notifications and distractions. And I want you to just pick a thing. And it doesn't have to be, you can decide what you want to work on. It can be read a book for 10 minutes. It can be read a book for 5 minutes. It can be, do a deep work in the direction of your career. It can be to really focus on, how you're showing up physically. Have you been distracted during workouts? Have they not felt productive? Wherever you want to put that time and energy, carve out dedicated space. It can be a small block or it can be as big as you can carve out time for, and create space to just eliminate distractions, turn off your notifications, put your phone away, and watch how that mental load diminishes. Right? So much of that mental load, again, is because there's so much coming in at us all the time. It's notifications and emails and phone calls. And when we're trying to work and we're in a meeting and we're on Zoom and we're trying to manage all of this and process that in our brains and manage that in relation to all the other million things we have on our plate. If you can carve out intentional space to quiet those things, it really starts to free up a tremendous amount of bandwidth. And you're also getting a lot done. Right? You're kind of refilling your cup. Again, recovery is gas in the tank. This is kind of that mental refill, as it were. It's really going to help kind of go a really long way. And it takes relatively small doses compared to how much time we have in the day. Third dimension is emotional recovery. So, what is emotional recovery? First, we need to process stress, not suppress it. So, this could be physical stress, mental, emotional, but we need to make sure that we have time to, and we're carving out intentional space to process that stress. So, if you do a hard workout, we need to make sure that you have time to recover. We need to make sure that you're not just pushing that down, stacking hard workout on top of hard workout on top of hard workout until you burn out. Same thing with our work, right? We need to make sure that if we're having stressful weeks, stressful blocks, that we buffer that with intentional time to process that stress, to think, process the information, strategize, make decisions on it. We can't just continue to push. There's certainly a time and a place for hard seasons and aggressive seasons, but those are only valuable if we take the time and energy to actually understand what we learned from them and how to deploy the information back into our work so that we can yield results. A few ways to do this, right? So what are the practices that we can use to aid in our emotional recovery? Journaling is a great one, right? Write it down. And I think for me, it doesn't have to be, I think when we think about journaling, or certainly, early on when I've thought about it, and we've heard about journaling, everyone's familiar with it. It's been in the mix for a very, very long time for good reason. It's extremely valuable, but not everybody is someone who is able to journal. Maybe they don't like it. Maybe it doesn't feel like it is, serving them. I tend to be one of those people. I struggle with the practice of journaling, but what does help me is to actually write things down. So I have a physical notebook where I plan out my week. I take notes. I brain dump things that are in my head, things I'm thinking about, things that I want to accomplish. And that for me is journaling, right? What we're doing is we're taking what's in our head and we're getting it out onto a page. I think there's value in physically actually writing that down. I know, so much of our lives, myself included, are on the internet and online, and we're not writing as much as we used to. But I think there's value in the act of writing something down. And so my point being is, in whatever way that can manifest for you, whatever way that feels productive, I say go for it, right? I think that can look and feel lots of different ways, but the goal is that you have a dedicated space and a dedicated time to get what's in your head out into a place, a central location that then allows you to kind of leave it there and you can move on, right? And the leaving it there is what's important, right? It doesn't live in our head. It doesn't take up space, and we're able to keep going. Of course, there's therapy, right? So having someone to talk to, a trusted individual that we can process the stresses in our lives with, goes a long way in our emotional recovery. We also have things like breath work, right? This is something that I've been experimenting more and more with lately. And the practice of controlling your breath, the practice of holding your breath, the practice of fighting and resisting the urge to breathe in a normal pattern, all of these things really help to buffer a lot of these emotional responses that we have. It helps to alleviate stress. It helps to get our nervous system firing. It helps to really connect us with our breath. And that's something that we don't think about, right? We breathe, we keep going. And we notice when our breathing is elevated due to effort, exercise, due to anxiety, but we don't take the time, at least I didn't, to really think about my breath intentionally. And I think that can be play a big role in our emotional recovery, is if we just take some time to breathe. One of the easiest ways I've found to do this is actually cold therapy. So if you get in a cold plunge, one of the only things that you can do in that environment is breathe. And so I've long said that regardless of what the science is on cold, this, that, or the other, I think that one of the real intrinsic values is that it forces you to breathe and it forces you to be cognizant of your breath. And I think that's a win. We don't get a lot of time. We don't often create space to make that happen. So if that's one of the side effects, then I think that is benefit enough. And so there's lots of ways to kind of bake that in to practices that we're already doing. Social connection is the kind of last piece here. So social connection really is kind of a multiplier when it comes to emotional recovery. We know that, we are social beings, we're social creatures, that connection is really what fuels us. There's been lots of research in the last several years around the connection and relationship as one of the primary drivers of longevity. And we know that emotionally, when we connect with others, that's something, again, that really multiplies our efforts. So we can do all these things, but if we're doing it in a silo, if we don't have a community of people around us, if we don't have folks that we feel like can support us and push us forward, and we can bounce ideas off of, and then we can lean on when we need support, it all starts to kind of erode. It can feel very lonely. It can feel isolated. Our emotional well-being is not going to be optimized, and certainly our emotional recovery is going to suffer if we're trying to do all this alone, if we're trying to shoulder the load, if we're trying to process all these things. So find your people. It is harder and harder now more than ever in a time period when everyone is so busy and we're running in lots of different directions. There's a million different things going on. It's really hard to carve out that intentional time. I get that, but it doesn't take a huge group. It doesn't take a huge community. It just takes knowing that you have a couple people in your corner. Lean on those folks. Make sure that you have intentional time to connect with them. That really helps with the emotional load. Again, it's a multiplier when it comes to emotional recovery. Easy way to do this. There's lots of ways to slice and dice this, but from a deliverable perspective, you might try to end each day with three lines, right? You can write them down again, a journal, your phone app, and you can write down one win, one frustration, and one lesson you learned. So the win piece is huge. And I've talked about this on other episodes, but I cannot stress enough the value of consistently recognizing your wins, no matter how small they are. It is incredible how quickly your attitude can change when you build in opportunities to recognize wins, no matter how small they are, on a daily and weekly basis. Right? This is something that I integrated for myself really kind of at the beginning of this year. I started doing it in my team meetings. We kick off every meeting I have with a win, right? Everybody goes around, shares that win. I kick off, calls that I have with individuals, people, friends, in-person meetings. I try to do it as much as I can. I do it in a reflection at the end of the week in my notebook that I plan out my weeks in. And what you do is it shifts the framework of how you recognize things that are happening in your life, right? You see the stressors, you have to navigate the challenging bits, but you also just start to rewire your ability to recognize wins, and that changes your mood entirely, right? As someone like myself who can tend to default to pessimism, it has been a dramatically impactful tool. And so I want to encourage you to, as it relates to your emotional recovery, I want to encourage you to reflect on one win, one frustration, so something that frustrated you, and one lesson that you learned today. And start to map that out and see how that starts to take things off your plate, right? How it starts to reduce that emotional load and you're able to actually recover. And I promise you, it is super impactful. I've fought it for a long time, but let me tell you, the practice has been really, really dramatic. And so I want to encourage you to do the same thing. Lastly, fourth dimension. Let's talk about strategic recovery. So this is the overlooked layer. This is the one I really want to bring out. I saved it for last because I think for me personally, and for lots of folks that I talk to, it's not one that comes up. It's not on our radar. This is the overlooked layer. And what it is it's stepping away to evaluate direction, right? So an example of that is let's step back quarterly and let's evaluate our business. Let's evaluate our training. Let's evaluate our family. Let's take an intentional step back in a predetermined interval to identify what's working and what's not. From a training perspective, it's the deload week, right? Ramp up, ramp up, ramp up. Take some time down, right? Take some intentional time. Let the body build fitness. And this is the strategic part. We can do all of these other things well, right? We can work on our physical recovery. We can dial on our sleep and our nutrition and restorative movement. We can work on our mental recovery, right? We can increase our cognitive abilities. We can reduce the cognitive load. We can work on decision fatigue. We can set out time for deep work. We can work on our emotional recovery. But if we do all that and we don't take time strategically to understand what's working and what's not, then we can work really, really hard in the wrong direction, right? And this is something I like to think about is, are we working hard? Are we working proficiently? Are we working efficiently in the right direction? And that's something that this strategic recovery really gets at, right? It is the quarterly business retreat, right? It's the step back. Let's get out of the office. Let's take a beat. Let's get in a new environment. It's a vacation. But in that vacation, maybe you take a half a day and you reflect, you plan, you goal set. And when we have to create this time, otherwise we don't understand how that data informs the direction that we're heading. So I want to encourage you to not only build on the 3 pieces that I mentioned earlier, but to really focus on strategic recovery. Right? One of the things this can look like is schedule a 2-hour monthly block to review and just ask, am I doing things right? Right? It could be a 1-hour block, 2-hour block, half day, weekend, morning, whatever works for you. But schedule a dedicated block every month and just specifically in service of the question, am I doing the right things? Am I focused on the right things? Specifically, am I focused on the right things in the direction of where I want to go, in the direction of my goals? Right? If your goal is increase fitness, are you doing the right things? Do you feel worn down? Do you feel burnt out? Are you injured? Or do you feel good? Do you feel like you're on a, solid progression? If it's career, if you want to build, grow your team, be a better leader, am I doing the right things? Right? Am I showing up in the right way? Am I communicating effectively? Am I taking enough time for myself? Am I in service of these other 3 pieces that I talked about, physical, emotional, mental recovery? So the strategic recovery piece is critical, right? I think that's the key. And that's what gets overlooked. It's easy to look at our wearables. It's easy to look at our sleep score every day. It's easy really even to focus on nutrition, to drink an extra glass of water. All those things are relatively easy to implement. It's the strategic application. It's the discipline required to be strategic that really pulls things together. So I want you to find some time and I want you to just ask yourself, am I doing the right things? Am I doing the right things in service of my goals in the direction of who I want to be and how I want to show up? So recovery is not just physical. We know that now. Hopefully you can see it's not just rest. It's mental, it's emotional, it's strategic. If you're just focused on sleeping more, and that's how you're trying to maximize your recovery, you're missing 75% of the opportunity. Right? If it's just drink more water, that's good, but it is multifaceted. It's multi-pronged, and so I want to encourage you to shift away from thinking that recovery is just physical, that recovery is just rest, and know that it is all these things. It's physical, mental, emotional, strategic, and just pick one, right? I gave you lots of different ways that can manifest. The goal here is it's not overwhelming. Let's just focus on small actions, right? Drink a little bit more water. Try to make decisions a little more quickly. Try to block out some time for deep work. Connect with a friend, right? And then just ask yourself, just take some time to reflect, right? Small doses, small pieces, so that you know you're moving in the right direction. So all that's well and good. Hopefully at this point you're like, okay, super clear. Got it. 4 dimensions of recovery. That all makes sense, Taylor. I hear you. But then, if you're like most of us, you're probably still finding yourself resisting, right? You're like, yeah, but it feels hard. I'm just going to put my foot on the gas. I'm going to go until I blow up and then I'll rest, right? I can sleep when I'm dead. Found myself saying that more often than I care to admit in my life. So why do we resist recovery? I think first and foremost, and this was one I can speak to, intimately from personal experience, it's an identity trap. We tell ourselves, well, if I slow down, I'll fall behind. If I don't work hard enough, or if I don't outwork people, success will be taken from me. I won't reach my goals. The only value that I bring is my ability to outwork everyone else in the room, to continue to push, to continue to drive, to not care about recovery, to think that I can operate in absence of that gas in the tank. So it's an identity trap, right? That's the number one thing, again, from my experience. That's the key place that we resist recovery from. Next is it's just cultural conditioning. It's become a badge of honor to hustle harder than the next person. And depending on what circle you run in, it's very, very pervasive, right? And there's a lot of circles that are touting that, right? Push harder than yesterday, keep going, outwork, again, sleep when you're dead, whatever that sounds like. But ultimately, there's a tremendous amount of cultural conditioning, and our access to that input, to that language, is greater now more than ever. And so we feel that we can wear hustle, we can wear the grind, we can wear the lack of recovery, the lack of sleep, the lack of any of these things as a badge of honor. Next is that there is a fear of visibility. So again, why do we resist recovery? Because rest doesn't show, results do. So we're like, well, if I rest, it's not going to yield anything, right? If I focus on recovery, there's no product at the end of that. I'm not pushing something. I'm not building something. I'm not building fitness, the business, the relationship, the whatever. What you have to recognize is that by doing that, it actually is building that thing, because it impacts your ability to show up and do that thing well. You can't build anything great, can't build a great body, a great business, a great relationship, a great mind when you're exhausted, when you're burnt out, when you're overworked, overtired, unclear on what recovery is supposed to look and feel like for you on a body that doesn't have what it needs to thrive. You're not doing anyone any favors. So we have to flip the script on that. We have to recognize that rest actually does show. Rest is what, and recovery is what gives us the ability to actually produce results. So I just want you to ask yourself, if you find yourself resisting, if you're like, okay, yeah, I don't know, this all sounds great, but again, I'm just going to put my foot on the gas. I want you to ask yourself, what's the story that you're telling yourself about slowing down? What is the narrative that's coming up in this moment right now? Maybe it's happening in real time. You're listening to this and you're like, I can't stop. I can't slow down. I don't have time. I don't have control over my schedule. There's no space. Whatever that is, ask yourself, what's the story? And then I want you just to break that down, right? Ask yourself, is it the truth? And then if it is the truth, what's one small piece of that you can tweak? Right? I hear it a lot. It's like, I don't have control over my schedule. Okay, I totally understand that. I get that. But we have control over more time than we think. What do we do with the time that we have? You scrolling on YouTube? Are you scrolling on on Instagram? Are you engaged in something that's meaningful? You wake up in the morning, maybe you wake up early, but how are you using that time? Right? Can you stretch? Can you do mobility? Can you take a walk outside? Go sit in a sauna, whatever. Right? So ask yourself, What's the story I'm telling myself about slowing down? When I'm honest with myself about what that answer is, then what action can I take to make some small movement? I promise you have more autonomy than you think, right? I work with people all over the world who are the busiest individuals, who have more pressure on them than anybody else, and they can find time, right? It's about reframing the narrative, and it's about recognizing where you can put your energy and effort to yield the results that you want and taking some control back. And I promise you, you can do it. There's small steps. All right. Lastly, I want to give you, I promised this at the top of the episode, I'm going to give you a 7-day, we'll call it a recovery audit, right? So each day I'm going to give you something to do, pick a 7-day block, and it's something you can implement right away. So again, I really want you to start to move on this. And I want you to be really clear about what it takes for you to move the needle in your life. So let's talk about 7 days. Again, we'll call it a recovery audit. We're going to take stock of what's going on, 7 days, and we're going to do something about it. So first one, day one, let's focus on sleep. So again, just track your hours and your quality. How much time did you sleep, and how much was that sleep, or how was there sleep quality there? So again, we want deep sleep and REM sleep. Now, this is specific to the individual. I'm not going to say how much of either, but you want sufficient deep sleep and sufficient REM sleep. If it's all light sleep, if you're waking up a lot, if you're restless, if your heart rate is high, these are all indicators that sleep quality is poor. So day one, just track that. Start to get some data, see what's going on. Day number two, we're going to focus on digital. So I want you to log your screen time. Most of our phones do this. Log your screen time and create one digital boundary. I talked about this earlier. Just put a boundary on for yourself, and shut your phone off at 7:00. Stop work at a certain time. Close your computer. Put your phone in your office. Don't check your phone first thing in the morning when you wake up. Take a second to walk around. Get some fresh air. Whatever it is, put a boundary on yourself. A digital boundary that starts to set the stage towards reducing the mental and emotional load. The technology piece, the digital footprint piece of this is really shows itself most notably in the mental and emotional components of recovery. Day three, do a stress check. Note your biggest stressor and how you responded. Right? I just want you to take note of it. What's the biggest thing that stressed you out that day? And just write it down. Right? So we're just going to start to build that cognitive awareness. You don't even have to take action. Day three, check your stress. Day four, movement. I want you to swap one intense session for a restorative one. So instead of doing a HIIT workout, go for a walk. Instead of doing a HIIT workout, do some mobility. Instead of doing an interval session, sit outside in the sun for a second. Take a couple deep breaths, right? Just training yourself that movement isn't classified or quantified by intensity. There's lots of value to movement over and above any sort of fitness gains that we get from that. Day five, we're going to check in socially. Invest in one meaningful conversation. Just call someone. Have coffee. However you can connect with them. Just start to move in that direction. Focus on that the social piece, right? That's going to be such a big part of the emotional recovery. Day six, we're going to focus on strategy. I want you to block out 1 hour to zoom out and reflect. Now, if you're hearing this and you're like, an hour is crazy. Okay, fine. 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Combine it with one of the other practices with a digital boundary. When you wake up in the morning, don't look at your phone. Take the first 5 or 10 minutes to zoom out and reflect, right? There's ways that you can stack these that they make sense. I want you to block out some time, and I want you to reflect. Again, we're going to zoom out what's working, what's not. You can ask yourself, am I doing the right things? That's the question when it comes to the strategic recovery component. And then to pull it all back to center, pull all the pieces together. On the 7th day, you're going to review. What'd you notice about your energy, your clarity, in your performance. You did one thing every day. What'd you notice? And the reason we're going to do this is because I don't want you to just guess at your recovery. I want you to think critically about it. I want you to train it like we talked about, right? It is a skill that can be trained and should be trained just like anything else. And so what you measure improves. So if you think critically about recovery, if you work to deploy some of the information that you get based on real feedback, real reflection, real data, then you can improve it. You can make it better. Right? So take those 7 days, start small, and I want you to just take note of what you notice. Take one takeaway from that and implement it long term. Right? I'll recap those real fast. Day 1, you're going to focus on your sleep. Day 2, you're going to focus on your digital boundaries. Day 3, you're going to check in on your stress. Day 4, you're going to focus on your movement. Day 5, you're going to invest in one deep conversation. You're going to focus on social. Day 6, you're going to be strategic. You're going to block out time to reflect. And then on the 7th day, you're just going to review. How'd you feel? What worked? What didn't? Take the one thing that you feel like was most meaningful and just work to implement that into your life in a more consistent way. So to bring this all together, I want you to recognize that recovery is not just downtime. It truly is the multiplier for every single thing that you do. Can't run a car on empty, right? You can't run a car without gas or electricity. This is the refill, right? Recovery is the thing that puts energy back in the body. It's the thing that allows you to show up. It's the thing that allows you to push. It's not more of what you're pushing at, right? That's the switch. That's the flip. That's the change in the narrative. The thing that allows you to do more of what you want isn't more of what you want, right? It's taking a beat. It's looking at these 4 dimensions of recovery, making sure that they're present in your life in a way that makes sense. Again, I'm not saying you have to do a wholesale change. Just work on small doses. Be cognizant of it. This is the biggest piece. If you're just aware that they exist, that goes a long way in starting to yield some results, specifically as it relates to mental and emotional recovery. And then just know, again, that's what's going to move the needle. If you feel like you're falling flat, if you feel like you've reached a plateau, certainly if you're truly burnt out, overworked, overtrained, injured, this is the piece. This is what you have to focus on. So with that in mind, I want you to ask yourself, which one of the 4 dimensions do you feel like you're neglecting right now? And what could a recovery strategy look like in this season of your life that you're in to focus a little bit on that specific area? So what's the dimension that you feel like you're neglecting? And then what could recovery look like from a strategic perspective to zoom in and focus a little bit more in that area? So I hope this was helpful. This is a new way to think about things, right? We're thinking about 4 dimensions, a 4-dimensional recovery, how that shows up in our life. I gave you clear 7-day steps for how to audit that time, how to look at it different, and how to deploy that in your life. I want you to walk away, and I hope you'll start to move on that right now. I want you to take your notes. I want you to take what's in your mind, the questions that I ask you, and I want you to pick one small thing, and I want you to move on that because it will make a difference. I promise you. As always, I'm grateful. Thank you so much. Can't do it without our incredible community, our audience for Endurance Minded. You've been with me for so many years. We got lots of new listeners that are coming on every single week, and I'm grateful for all of you that have showed up and contributed. As always, you can find us at enduranceminded.com. Let us know what's going on. Drop us a note at the bottom. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform, wherever you're listening right now. Take a second to rate, subscribe, share this episode or one that you've liked in the past with a friend. It would mean the world to me. And until then, I'll see you next time on Endurance Minded.